Today I'm with Meredith Rosenthal, and Dr. Rosenthal is the faculty chair for the Advanced Leadership Initiative at Harvard University. And Meredith, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast with me today.
My pleasure.
I know that this role for you is fairly new, I think, and I would like to know more about the role and the leadership initiative, and also kind of how you came to be in the position.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So I just finished my first semester as the faculty chair for the Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative, and it's an incredible honor to have been invited to become the faculty chair, the second faculty chair of the program after 10 years of success of the program here at Harvard. So as you know, this idea of advanced leadership, the idea of helping to reorient, reinvigorate individuals who've had successful careers and help them make a transition to developing a new role for themselves in social impact it's such a terrific idea, one that is much needed, both because of the complex social problems that we see around the world and because we're all living longer and needing to find purpose in our lives beyond that first stage of working and achieving as individuals. And so it's really a pleasure to be part of the program. My work in health policy has had a social impact purpose to it as well, and that is one of the reasons why I was attracted as a faculty member wanting to work with the program, and that's really how I got to be where I am.
Interesting. I did not realize that. I was talking with the dean of our business school this morning. She and I had a conversation, and she was saying that Dr. Moss Cantor was her professor when she was a professor at Harvard. I mean, a student at Harvard. So, and we were also talking about the article that I had shared with you. Dr. Moss Cantor wrote about this region in South Carolina and the global leadership that's occurred here. So, we just we have so much respect for her and for you as well. So, it's a treat for us today to get to spend some time with you and to actually learn more about you. And we like telling stories on our podcast of people that are doing amazing things. And I guess I'd be curious to know what inspired you to go this route and what you studied and just a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, so I'm trained as a health economist, and so I'm someone who's always been attracted to using numbers and thinking systematically about problems. I love economics as a tool, but I got into health economics and health policy because I wanted to work on an area where I would feel like I was contributing to social improvements. And healthcare is, as you know, an area where we have a lot of challenges, particularly related to equity and affordability in this country. Mm-hmm. And so that's really, how I got into my career originally. And so the idea of wanting my career to be oriented around impact is something that I've held for a long time. On the other hand, when one is early in an academic career, the opportunities for impact, they sort of come incrementally as you develop your own research agenda and your work. And so I'm at a stage where I feel like, much like our fellows, I'm able to really turn more directly to thinking about this impact question. Mm-hmm. I can worry a bit less about getting grants and writing papers. I'm still doing that, but I really have the great privilege of being able to think about putting the impact really at the center of my work, and I can do that in different ways. I work with state government and the federal government to try to translate my work into better policies. And now I have this opportunity with the Advanced Leadership Initiative to find ways to support these amazing individuals in taking advantage of a year at Harvard and being part of this ecosystem, hopefully for the rest of their lives, so that they can create impact in a whole range of social areas.
So it sounds like you're getting acclimated in the role, starting to feel more comfortable and really, spread your wings. What have you learned in the last, several months since you've been in the role? Any surprises or any most proud moments, or what have you learned?
Well, I think first and foremost, I've learned what a powerful idea advanced leadership is. And the people who have come to Harvard and these other programs around the country to explore advanced leadership, to explore programs that enable people in sort of the next stage of their lives to find new senses of purpose and new ways to thrive, that people are just so enthusiastic. The fellows at Harvard who are there now and who are our alumni, they're so loyal to the program because they believe it's had such an incredible impact on their lives. And I attribute that, both to the brilliant design by Rosabeth Moss-Kanter, but also to the fact that this is just inherently a powerful idea. And when you get people together for a year to do as much reflection on themselves and the critical areas where they can have an impact, the experience is really amazing. And so I'm amazed at the loyalty and generosity of our fellows and how much they feel that this program, this idea, has affected their lives. And likewise, I've been really impressed as I've gone around the university and actually talking with people like you outside the university, how much interest I have found in supporting this idea. And, faculty members who maybe haven't heard about the program in the past, they get very excited when I explain it to them. Random strangers I meet on airplanes, when I tell them what I do, everyone is so excited about this idea. So that's what's really impressed me.
It makes so much sense. I'm curious to know, does this program fall under, it's not a 4-credit program, obviously, it's more of an executive education program, is that correct?
Yeah, in some sense. So at Harvard, the Advanced Leadership Initiative is outside of all of that structure. It lives under the office of the president and the provost as an interfaculty initiative.
Oh, great.
So there are a limited number of these interfaculty initiatives at Harvard. And so, in every way, our fellows have a passport to the entire university.
Wonderful. And so you're hearing some really good feedback from people who've gone through the program. Any stories or any anecdotal kind of information you might share about that? Does anyone come to mind? Any particular comment?
Well, again, what has really struck me is how tight-knit the community is of alumni, both within their individual cohorts and across them. People who were here at Harvard in some of the original cohorts 10 years ago, they continued to see each other every year. They travel together. They serve on each other's boards in nonprofit activities. What's I think so amazing is we just had our big spring symposium that brings the alumni back to Harvard, and we had 200 people come back and come to support the current cohort and help them with their work. And I was just really delighted to see how many connections were made, where someone would be talking about their project that they're working on, and one of our alumni alumni would say, this is a really great idea. I'm doing something really similar. I'd like to work with you, or I know someone who can help you get funding for that initiative, those kinds of connections. So that, I think, speaks to the strength of the network, which is an incredible asset to the program. So not only, what happens when people are on campus, but what we hope to create through this larger ecosystem.
Sure. And I'm curious, as you were just now talking, you said that you were talking about alums, but what's the percentage of people that go through your program that actually did graduate from Harvard versus those that never have gone to your school?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know the exact percentage, but you're right. There's a non-trivial percentage who have some degree from Harvard, but it's far less than half. If I had to guess, I would say it's between 30 and 40%.
Sure.
And it is, I think, one of the reasons that people are excited about the program is to have the opportunity to take advantage of all the resources of the university. And I think it's really wonderful that there have been connections maintained with the university. So, for example, we have a former fellow who did go to Harvard College as an undergrad. And when he came back, he ended up living in his undergraduate house as a senior fellow, and he's there now. So there are ways in which people have found an opportunity to stay connected with Harvard, but to also gain new connections. We have current and former fellows who, for example, serve on advisory boards for centers at Harvard, the Center for Women in Public Policy, a center that in support of human rights. And so these are all ways that people can be connected, not only while they're on campus, but also into the future.
Wonderful. I did want to ask you, and it may be too soon to do this because I'm sure you're still formulating and thinking through and kind of absorbing everything, but if you were to look 5 years into the future at ALI at Harvard, in terms of if it had evolved just as you had hoped, what would be happening, or how might it have changed, or how might have stayed the same? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great advantage of coming in after 10 years is that the structures of ALI are well in place and the program is very strong. And I can think about sort of expanding our reach in some senses. And so I think there are a couple of ways that I could imagine in the next 5 years that you might see more of that. One is a within Harvard situation. So as I said, as an interfaculty initiative, we hover above Harvard's 13 schools and institutes, but we're not equally present in all of them. And historically, our center of gravity has been with the business school, not surprisingly, and the Kennedy School. The School of Public Health has played a pretty strong role as well. But we're now at a stage where we have an opportunity to make stronger connections, for example, with the Divinity School, with the Engineering School. These are places where people, of course, are working towards social change, working on major social problems with a whole different set of tools and theories and ways of acting. And so I'm very excited about the opportunity to do more. And one thing I would like us to do is to be a place where we could serve as the hub for social impact at Harvard. Not that we're unique in terms of our emphasis on social impact. There are other wonderful institutes and centers, the Social Innovation and Change Initiative, the Social Enterprise Initiative, but we could bring them all together and convene and actually take action on social problems. So that would be really exciting to me if the Advanced Leadership Initiative could be a hub at Harvard where we would convene people and we would be the place to go if you were looking to address, for example, education inequities at Harvard. We'd be the people to help you pull people together. So So that's one thing. I think the other thing that I'm excited to work on is finding more ways to engage and connect with our alumni. And we have these twice a year convenings that are very important, but I would like to see us finding ways to connect our alumni. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Just a little dry. Ways to connect our alumni to address current problems. And so just as an example, people are very interested in democratic engagement in the U.S., but also elsewhere in the world. And, could we mobilize our 400 alumni wherever they are in the world to help increase civic engagement, increase democratic participation, and can we collectively put together a toolkit to help people enforce the importance of democratic participation and sort of other common challenges. Maybe some of them will be narrower, and we could think about bringing 10 people together to address climate change issues around a particular set of concerns, water quality, for example, in the middle of the country. So I think providing a platform for collective action for our larger community is something I'd like to see us be able to do within the next 5 years.
Brilliant. I think it certainly makes a lot of sense. I'm curious to know, because I know that Dr. Moss Cantor actually, when she originally was writing about this, sort of sent out a charge to higher education across the country to say, are you thinking about this population? And this is a population you might be missing. Can you give us a sense of what you're seeing in terms of other institutions beginning to do a similar program?
Yes, I think that's also quite remarkable. My sense is that many universities in the U.S. are moving in this direction. I've certainly heard about close to a dozen that are at some stage of planning, and obviously Stanford and Notre Dame are sort of well into it, and a number of other institutions are moving in this direction. And it makes so much sense, regardless of whether these programs are focused around social impact. I think they are all in some way focused around purpose. And,
sure.
Because I think that is really what we all as humans will be facing as we think about phasing out of our primary careers with, we all hope a number of high quality decades ahead of us. Then what next? What makes life worth spending another 20 or 30 years outside of your working career? What will invigorate people? And ultimately, I think there's a good discussion about the extent to which purposeful engagement actually extends life in addition to increasing the quality of it.
And aren't you fortunate to be involved in doing just that as you move much later in your own career? And for Dr. Cantor, she's been right in the middle of this for her own, later in her career. So that, to me, that's very exciting. And I do want to shift the conversation a little bit now to ask you a little bit more, to just a little more personal. I'm curious to know, of your career, what accomplishment do you feel most proud of?
Well, for me, I think the thing I feel most proud of is my mentorship accomplishments. So I've had the privilege of mentoring students and junior faculty and others here at the School of Public Health largely. That's been something that I've loved doing. And I now have a wonderful group of former mentees who I guess they're always mentees. Who are themselves professors or working in a whole variety of areas, and for me that's been the most important thing. Those relationships are so important to me, and it is so much more exciting to celebrate someone else's accomplishments. So that's the most meaningful part of my career.
Wonderful. And in terms of challenges or frustrations, or even a childhood challenge you ever came, is there a challenge that you might share with us that really maybe shaped you in some way?
I know, I was a little stumped by that question. I just have to say first that I'm a child of privilege. I feel in so many ways I have been blessed. But, I think for all of us, a big challenge is really understanding yourself.
Yes.
And your limits and your strengths. And it's nice to be at a stage of my life where I do know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at.
Mm-hmm.
And I see how those two things relate to each other. I don't wish to be anyone that I'm not. I can see very clearly how what appear to be weaknesses are also strengths in their own ways. And so I actually know how to deploy myself in a way that will both, accomplish something, but also not make me miserable. And that's a really nice place to be.
Yes, it is. And you don't get there overnight.
No.
So tell me, and because our podcast is called The Business of Innovation, and we're interviewing individuals from a lot of different disciplines, but on a scale of 1 to 10, I would just ask you, how creative do you think you are?
I think in some ways I'm pretty creative. I think one of my great strengths, which is also a great weakness, is that I'm willing to take risks, and I am pretty okay with failure. And so I'm creative in the sense that I'm willing to try something, even if I can't quite figure out what is going to happen when I do it.
Sure.
So we're doing a lot of experimentation this year within ALI on that theory that, things work great right now, but could we do something a little bit different? So I'm creative in that sense. If you were talking about creative in an artistic sense, I'm pure stick figures.
Yeah.
But I do feel very comfortable taking risks, and I think that's what innovation is all about. Is about stepping outside the known and being willing to deal with whatever consequences come from that.
Interesting. That was my very next question: is what does innovation mean to you? Could you elaborate just a little?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think to be truly innovative, you do need to get into the zone where you can't quite you can't see what it is that you're aiming for exactly. There's not a model. You need to try something based on an educated guess, but without having guide rails necessarily. And I think there's a lot of incremental innovation that it takes less of a risk. But when we think about the greatest innovations of our lifetime, they were sort of inconceivable before they happened, and I think that's really the space to think about. And obviously, today people are talking a lot about design thinking, and I think the intuition from design thinking is really critical in innovation too, is really having an understanding of what the ecosystem is, what users need, but not necessarily having a good model for where you're going, but having a really clear idea about where you are and how people will actually behave around that kind of innovation.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm curious also, do you consider yourself to be a disruptor?
Yeah, I don't know. That's I'm not sure. I like I said, I definitely consider myself to be a risk taker, and so I think you should ask my staff. I think they might consider me to be a little disruptive. I definitely am not someone who embraces convention. So maybe in that sense, I'm a disruptor. But I guess on the other hand, a Harvard professor, I'm not sure how disruptive you might think of me. But I'm certainly not afraid of change, and I think that we should not accept the status quo just because it's the status quo.
I wanted to ask you what advice you would have for anyone who wants to be more creative, who wants to innovate.
Well, for me, this year, just thinking sort of narrowly, the critical part of innovation has been collaboration and listening to a lot of different voices and really trying to get outside of my own head. Mm-hmm. And so I think, again, going back to that design thinking, trying to understand what the world looks like from different perspectives in terms of the key stakeholders, that's been what I think is sort of most informative when it comes to thinking about what kinds of new programs, what kinds of new ideas we might bring to fruition.
I was thinking about some things you said earlier, but you talked about kind of knowing your strengths and weaknesses, which is so important, for anyone. And what I'd like to know, what is something that you really like about yourself in terms of how you are in the world?
Well, I think one of the things that I've realized is over time is an incredible gift that I have that I think I'm not sure if it's something learned or endowed in some way, but I am very good about not worrying about things I can't control, and it is very helpful. I do not spend a lot of time looking backwards, and I do not spend a lot of time beating my head against walls that are not going to move. And so I'm pretty good at prioritizing and spending my energy where it's going to be effective and not sweating the stuff that is outside of my control.
I'm very jealous. And tell me something that you don't like so much about yourself.
Well, again, I think all of my strengths are also my weaknesses. So I sometimes forget that not everyone feels that way, and I'm not always necessarily sensitive to the frustrations that other people bear around things they can't control that maybe I contribute to. So, I tend to be a don't worry, be happy, but sometimes I overlook the things that other people worry about.
Sure. Is there anything you would point to over the last several months that would be maybe your most proud moment since you've been there?
Well, I guess for me, when we brought all the alumni back last month, or actually 2 weeks ago, it was so gratifying to me to see the level of enthusiasm that both our current fellows and our alumni had around some of the program innovation that we've been working on this spring. People were excited to have some new opportunities to engage. We made some modest changes in the way we were organizing events, the kinds of voices we were hearing from. And my sense is that people really found those changes to be energizing. So that is wonderful. Of course, all of those changes were very much a team effort in collaboration with my staff, as well as with lots of input from our fellows. But beginning to see some of the work that we've been doing to think about, okay, how do we re-energize and find new ways to get people to be able to have a higher level impact, and to see some of that actually bearing fruit has been very gratifying.
Excellent. And I'm sure there must be any number of ways that you're measuring the impact when you think about individuals' transitional piece and then the social impact. So I guess different measurables, I would think.
That's true. And measurement is something that we've been thinking a bit about and trying to do more of, and wanting to work more on measurement. And of course, the way the program is designed, we consider social impact to be really at the heart of what we're doing, but there's a lot on the way to social impact. So, do people have an experience while they're at Harvard that really helps them make this transition? And do they find new purpose? Do they find new tools and collaborators to have impact? And I'm very interested in the personal transitions that people are making.
Sure.
And I would love to think more about both how do we invest more in that, but then also how do we measure it. I've been so struck by the deep personal friendships that people make in these cohorts. And someone was saying to me, I came to Harvard at 60. The last thing I felt like I needed was a new group of friends. But this group has really changed my life, and in a very personal sense. And I think that's so interesting. And we all make friends at different stages of our lives. We have our work friends, and for those of us who have children, you make a group of friends around child rearing. But then you can imagine when you're at this next stage that what you're looking for and also your sense of self is in such a different place. As we were just talking about, I think we can be so much more honest with ourselves at 50 and 60 than we ever could in our 20s. And I think that changes the nature of the friendships that you make. So that's all intriguing, and I think it's part of the impact.
That's totally intriguing, and just the idea that you are really fostering that space. You're holding that space for individuals at this age to really, sit back, reflect, and giving them some ways to do that. Some tools for doing that when they've probably never done it to that extent, and certainly not at this juncture. So that to me is just incredibly exciting. I was curious. I wanted to know. And to me, it sounds like you have just landed in the perfect job because of your interest, and then your, the public policy and the economic aspect of that, and the measurables and so forth. And you just look like this is the perfect place for you. What are you curious about now? What else are you interested in beyond this, or personally, or what are you curious about?
Well, I am very curious about, in some ways, don't tell anyone. I feel like having the opportunity to chair this program is my opportunity to be an ALI fellow. You may know that we have a rule that you have to be out of Harvard for 10 years before you can come to ALI.
Oh, wow.
I can't actually be a fellow, so this is my secret way in. So for me, I'm really curious about where this will bring me in terms of, I'm 51 now, as I am chair for a number of other years. I'm thinking about my own transition.
Sure.
What is that going to be like for me in 10 years, 15 years, whatever it is? And so I'm very curious about what I'll find, and I know again the kinds of things that make me happy and that I feel like I'm good at. And I think mentoring is at the heart of that. Yes. And there's a piece of my leadership at ALI that I think is connected to mentoring. And so I'm interested to see how that develops and where it takes me.
That's perfect. And I would totally confess right now that part of the reason I'm so intrigued with your program is because I'm at that stage beyond you, but I'm at that stage of being 60 and going, what exactly is next and what does that look like for me? And then also seeing friends and colleagues who, are a little uncomfortable with that.
For sure.
And even sometimes men more than women, not to stereotype, but I do think that it's on everyone my age. It's kind of on our minds. So your program definitely intrigued me for that reason. I've been looking at it for about the last 3 years. So in terms of what you want to accomplish going forward, personally or professionally, anything you'd like to share?
Well, I really, like I said, really want to elevate ALI at the university and really tap into some of the wonderful colleagues that I have in places like the Divinity School, in other parts of the university that I think are eager to connect with us and to help think about our next stage and how ALI can really fulfill the promise that Rosenthal Moss Cantor and the other founders envisioned for it as a platform for higher education and also for social impact. And I think there's a lot more to be done to make ALI a platform for change, and it is really ready for that. So I think that's what I'm really looking forward to.
One question for you, and not to put you on the spot, but I'm just curious, as there are other institutions throughout the country that are maybe thinking, hey, we want to do this, and of course everyone might do their flavor of this, but do you ever see yourself hosting a day or 2 days where you might, and Rosabeth will love this because of the article that she wrote about Greenville-Spartanburg, and because of all the change that's happened in Greenville and all the lists that we appear on now of the best places to visit and all kinds of things, we kind of have a Find Your Waterfall conference where cities come here to talk and study our city, which she would probably love to know, because she wrote her article a while back. But I'm just curious if that's the sort of thing you would ever entertain, even at just a day of people coming in and maybe hearing a little bit more about your design of the program and that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. Well, again, since I'm the newbie, I feel like it's not totally clear that I have anything to teach anyone. But I think the idea of collaboration and cross-fertilization across programs makes great sense. And as you well know, universities do that, schools do that in visiting committees and the like. And that's sort of a very well-established mechanism for institutions of higher education is the idea that they would share best practices and help each other continually improve. And I think we should absolutely do that.
Great. What is the best advice you ever received?
Oh gosh, I think I'm embarrassed to say that the best advice I've ever received is still from my mother, and she is, I think, the one who endowed me with this ability to not worry too much about things I can't control. She was always advising me to put something down, step back when things aren't going well, to give yourself some space. Sure. And she helped me see that it's not necessarily a healthy exercise to try to take every activity to its perfected state, that some things you should walk away from. And so that's advice that continues to serve me, is really having the ability to prioritize and let some things go.
She sounds like a very wise woman.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that. How do you want to be remembered?
Well, it's funny. Someone was just telling me, someone today, actually, a former ALI fellow, we were having a conversation, and she said that someone had talked about this idea of, you spend all this time working on your resume, and instead you should be working on your eulogy. I think I would most want to be remembered as a generous mentor. That's the thing that has been most meaningful to me, and I feel like I have been so privileged in so many ways. I have great advice from my mother, so many great opportunities, and that giving back to other people and helping other people find a path, whether it's in my field or in some other area, has been the most important thing that I've done.
Meredith, you are awesome. You are just a dear, and I just can't thank you enough for sharing those words of wisdom. So I'm going to be thinking about what your mom said and not worrying about things. I feel better. So take care. I hope we get to talk again.
All right. Thanks, Gail.
Okay. You too. Bye-bye.